Hey everybody, Brendan here, welcome back to another video. Today we're continuing our run, our Sicilian, our Dragon Sicilian run. Let's play a hyper modern this time. Normally I go for d6 first. Okay, they played the alapin. We could go knight to f6 first. So knight to f6 is going to be advised for those that play against the Italian, and I think a good way to ask why is we're going to put ourselves under pressure here with g6. So knight to f6 is the best move, but we have to ask ourselves why. If we don't know why, then we're not really going to improve our chess, are we? So we'll take on d4, bishop to g7, and we're going to notice that we're going to have a deficit of space. And this is going to be extremely important to understand why. So they're going to play knight c3, knight f3, all these natural moves, and we're going to have some problems. So to start, I like d6. d6 prevents e5, and also could prepare some bishop g4 in the future. We're not quite prepared for it, though, which is actually really important to mention. The problem is if we end up playing the move bishop to g4, the problems that we run into here are mainly that... Okay, so they played bishop b5 check instead. I'm thinking just knight d7. Yeah, let's just play knight to d7. But the biggest problems are that sometimes this bishop to b5 check can be annoying. So maybe I should have played bishop to b5, bishop to d7, but I just thought we would try this out. So knight to f6, there's e5. I'm not sure if this is a problem for us. Looks like it could be, so I'll play a6 to start. And b5 here. And I think now I am slightly more okay with going here. The problem is there's still e5 in the air. You see how annoying this is? So maybe we have to deal with some sort of e6. Yeah, I think we have to go e6. If they ever go e5, we might have to go d5 and vice versa. But again, this knight wants to go on f6, but it really can't. And in these dragon positions, unless the position's extremely closed, and this isn't really a close, this is a semi-closed position because one pair of pawns are traded. If two pairs of pawns are traded, then it's open. If none, then it's a closed position. But the problem is you don't really want to put this guy here because you start weakening some dark squares, and it might not immediately be a problem, but it's very possible just to land into trouble just because you play g6 and e6 where the position can still open up. So gotta watch out for that. In the closed, g6 is e6, g6 and e6 is played quite a bit. That's to prevent f4, f5. Here, f4, f5 is less of a plan for them. It doesn't really feel like that's their best avenue. So bishop to b7. I'm not worried of a5, of course. This guy is hanging, so that's more important. We could play a5 ourselves, which I don't hate, but I really gotta get these pieces into the game. They're bothering me, and I want to play knight c6, potentially to a5. I feel like this is a very important thing for us to try. And again, our bishops are just a little uncomfortable because they haven't really had to push their pawns yet. So we could try going for e5, but after d5, we kind of get into those like weird scenarios where it's kind of a King's Indian, but it's not because the c-pawns are traded. And if we're saying that it's a King's Indian with c-pawns traded, who does that benefit? Not us. The King's Indian, you want the queen side as closed or as like, their attack as delayed as possible. So we don't really want to give them space on the queen side so easily. Nicely enough, this does also prevent a5. But again, you're starting to maybe see the problems here, right? We haven't done anything particularly wrong. At least it feels like we haven't. Yet, at the same time, we're having a lot of troubles already. So, I don't like taking. d5 is such a strong move. I don't like taking, but it feels like we might have to. If they take with the bishop, I think that's the best way for them to take. If pawn takes, that's reasonable, but then I get the e5 square, and I'm actually very happy. Generally, pushing these pawns is not something they want to do. I could try knight to a5 there after bishop takes. But then I'm left with this weak pawn. Okay, good. They actually took with the pawn. This is a mistake, though, luckily. So we will play knight to e5 here. Now we have a nice square for our knight. And this knight can come to c5. We can play moves like a5 if we really need to. d6 is a bit harder to attack right now than d5 is. So feels like we actually got something, which is really nice. Yeah, I'm not really concerned here. Rook to c8 looks nice. Knight to c5 looks pretty good as well. d3 looks a little bit weak, right? So let's go. Actually, if I go a5, they might go knight to d4. So maybe I should hold off on that for a second. I could take and then play knight to e5. If they take, I'm extremely happy there. I might take with the pawn, go f5, e4 or something. Knight to c5 is still pretty interesting. Getting that bishop would be nice. But I really like the idea of taking, going knight e5 and then a5, just to make sure there's not really anything to target here. But that's a bit slow. And right now these squares are covered, so maybe rook c8 is actually best because of that, right? If the squares are covered, this square is covered a ton of times by bishop, knight, and now the rook. And this square is covered by the pawn, so we're not quite worried. If they play a5, it's unclear if that's an advantage or a weakness for them. Either way, I'm probably going to go queen b6 or queen to a5 if they go rook to c1. To connect the rooks, so if they end up taking, we can take over the c-file. Yeah, here, it looks like they actually lose a piece. So we can take on f3 with check, and then we can win the g5 bishop. So, check. I almost moved the queen. That would not have been good. Great. Now we take on g5. And things are going extremely well now. We have a lot to be proud of. But we still have some conversion to do. So, unfortunately, rook c1, yeah, both my queen and the rook are actually covering that square. So we can just take that guy off the board and take this guy off the board, which is a bit of an unfortunate mistake. One way to think about it is, generally, when your opponent is worse or already losing, whether they've lost material or whatever, they're much more likely to make more mistakes after that. So sometimes it's not the mistake immediately that's the problem, like d5, for example. d5 isn't really their losing move or whatever. It's more so the fact that they gave me play. But then the mistakes following that first mistake is where the game becomes decisive for somebody, or it changes the result of the game, whether it's decisive to no longer decisive, or, well, you know, better for one side than losing or whatever. But yeah, so knight to e5 here, and we can just take on f3. Unfortunately, their queen was in a tough spot there, but yeah, now we just keep taking things, and the game's kind of over now. Yeah, good game. So again, one of the things we should mention are that we intentionally took a worse position here. Let me change it to the analysis board there. We intentionally took a worse position, and we tried to understand what was going on and why you should avoid it. So just remember, if you're a dragon player, it doesn't mean you can play the dragon against absolutely everything. There's very few cases where the dragon's not so great. So the two places where the dragon struggles the most is the Yugoslav attack, which is the main line. That's why you don't really see it at the top levels. And also the alapin. So again, if you see this move c3, avoid g6. You have to play something else. And again, this move knight f6 is actually quite a good reply. And you get, actually, if you think about it, you kind of get like a weird alapin defense after e5, knight to d5. So hey, if you like the Alekhine, then you'll love playing against the alapin. But this is the most effective way to play against it in the first place. So yeah, g6 is putting us under some pressure. As you can see, it went from equal to it was originally like +1, and now it's dipping a little bit. But yeah, we are worse here. And I don't think it's even a slightly worse. I think we're just worse after a d4. So yeah, maybe we should have considered something like d5. I tried to play this like I'm sure a lot of Dragon players would. d5 is probably the most interesting one because we're trying to immediately challenge the center. But even still, so d6, bishop b5. It says knight c6 or bishop to d7, knight to d7 causes us some problems. I'm guessing that's where the two mistakes came from. But other than that, yeah, I feel like again, things were just rough, right? For example, bishop f4 attacking this guy. That's again why you don't really want to play e6 and g6, but we're forced to go into these contortions sometimes because, hey, well, the center is really annoying. So again, keep that in mind, but very instructive. So knight c6, and the second they push, so they have a very pleasant position. This a4 move didn't feel like it was completely necessary, but looks like they are still okay here. Just d5, that's kind of what ruined things a little bit for them, because hey, once you push one of these central pawns in a way that you don't really want to, first off, you generally will want to play e5 because this bishop shutting it off is so much more important than the other one, this guy. But because of that, well, again, black's fine, because now all of a sudden you open up at least one of the bishops and things end up turning out okay. So bishop takes d5. I thought I was still under some pressure. I think I was mentioning knight to a5 was interesting. I was also thinking about knight d to e5, and if they take, we can take with the pawn. Even rook c8 or queen b6 or something, but it still feels a little awkward because this guy feels a lot more safe than this guy. So one of the good things is, though, we do have our bishop open at the very least. Anyways, I think that's going to cover it for this game. I hope you guys did enjoy. So remember, if you see the alapin, play this knight f6 move and knight to d5. And don't worry about your piece getting pushed around a bunch. You're actually creating a structure in which it's actually totally fine for you. You just have to know a little bit of lines, but hey, that's about it. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.